clay were made to form the body of man. There were creations of smokeless fire and creations of light. They live in the veins of man, influencing every decision. They stand side by side with man, writing and recording. As long as man lives, this fact will remain. The world is old, and a time of chaos will arrive before it dies. Promises will be made. When the smoke clears, the world will cease to exist, and man will find out what he has done in his lifetime. This has been written. The world of the unseen.
James is not here anymore. It is me and I'm talking to you. So watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay. Watch me whip. Watch me nay-nay.
I gotta find a better pointer as well. I've been using these glasses. The idea was that because it's so tall, you'd be able to see it. And why am I even surprised?
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Many years ago, I named my alter ego Sasha, and it's something that stuck. I feel like Sasha is a big treat for my fans. It's definitely exciting.
Sasha is my alter ego.
And I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me. And I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me.
I felt something else come into me. I felt something else come into me.
I guess I wouldn't be very entertaining on the stage, so Sasha comes out and she's fearless. You know, she can do things that I cannot do when I'm in rehearsal. I mean, I can try, but then it just doesn't happen. I can sing notes and sing strong and do all these things that when I'm just by myself, I can't do. I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me. And I knew that was going to be my coming out night.
See little Wayne's face here. Okay. See his eyes? Looks like he has some contacts in, or his eyes are yellow. Not quite sure.
I'm very, very pleased to announce that the first baby clone is born. She was born yesterday at 11:55 a.m. in the country where she was born. So this will not give you more details about the location.
These guys in the funny suits are making gene chips. The little needles are dropping tiny, nearly invisible bits of DNA onto glass slides. And where did the DNA come from? From babies. Thousands of them.
I run a company called Cambrian Genomics. We make DNA and we sell it for money. We'd like to really allow anyone in the world to become a genetic designer. If you want to build a creature right now, what you would do is you would log on to a website called Genome Compiler. You would design an organism just by dragging and dropping these Lego DNA pieces. That information would be sent to our printer. We would print the DNA out for you. A lot of people think, like, because everyone will be able to design DNA, that everyone will have their own custom designer dinosaur that's hanging out in their kitchen. The problem with that model, though, is even though we've reduced the cost of making an organism, it doesn't reduce the cost of verifying that that organism is safe. We're not going to send it to you. We'll send it instead to a contract research organization, which does have significant resources to be able to keep it controlled and safe. And then they can actually take your DNA, put it into an organism, and boot up your new creature.
In a closed-door meeting at Harvard University on Tuesday, nearly 150 scientists got together to organize the Human Synthetic Genome Project. These days, when Harvard isn't organizing black masses for its students, it's holding Bilderberg-like meetings to create a totally synthetic human genome. Their goal is to artificially synthesize all 3 billion base pairs or chemical letters in the human genome. Unlike the original Human Genome Project, whose purpose was to read the entire genome, this project, the Synthetic Human Genome Project, will Frankenstein into reality a transgenic human. This process, of course, will require gutting out a human embryo and replacing it with synthetic DNA. Not only will this pave the way for rolling out synthetic humans off the assembly line, it will pave the way for human cloning as well as chimera hybrids of all shapes and sizes. Flying pigs may soon become a reality, ladies and gentlemen, and with gene drive technology, they could have the code built in to force their synthetic genome onto subsequent generations. Clones breeding clones to naturally weed out the population. This will be a pivotal component to the post-human agenda. Since these future clones and transgenic humans will have little choice but to implement the plans of their originating laboratory, sooner rather than later we will see transgenic humans born with cognitive augmentation, half man, half machine, able to upload to the communications grid and ready to download their orders.
Well, we're a company that produces 100% organic human sleeves. You're probably wondering what's a human sleeve. Well, if you gather around, I can let you know what we do here in full details. So here at Psychosec, we've been able to achieve true immortality by taking your human consciousness and storing it on a device called a cortical stack.
Real.
Now, human cloning raises deep ethical concerns. There is virtually unanimous consensus in the scientific and medical communities that attempting to use known cloning techniques to actually create a human being is untested, unsafe, and morally unacceptable. 2 days ago, the Senate voted to take the time necessary to carefully craft a bill that will ban the cloning of human beings while preserving our ability to use cloning technology for morally acceptable and medically important purposes.
A hopeful society has institutions of science and medicine that do not cut ethical corners and that recognize the matchless value of every life. Tonight, I ask you to pass legislation to prohibit the most egregious abuses of medical research, human cloning in all its forms, creating or implanting embryos for experiments, creating human-animal hybrids, and buying, selling, or patenting human embryos.
Right. Absolutely.
You know, if you go to Disney World, for instance, down there in the Haunted Mansion, you see the hologram, right? Oh, you know how to make a hologram. Well, our scientists have learned how to make people. They call them synthetics. Are you familiar with those?
Well, actually, we just interviewed John Lear, and he was talking about being in an audience in which they were given a lecture by a guy that they thought was real and found out later he was a hologram.
Well, it's a synthetic. A synthetics, when you touch their skin, it feels like plastic almost. That's the latest technique. The old techniques, if you guys can rent a video, the boys from Brazil, rent it, because in it, it gives you the exact way how our government's been making people.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
and the
come on.
Soviets have a different method called...
I mean, making people meaning temporary people?
No, walking, talking ones.
Meaning through genetics? You're not talking about that?
Well, let me tell you. The movie shows it, but I'll share it with you right now.
All right.
All I need to do is take 2 cells off of your body, yours.
Uh-huh.
We give them a small electrical charge. I'm just they'll act like a fertilized egg. If I got a fertilized egg, all I need is a receiver in order to make it. And the fetus starts growing, right? Needs food. Well, they can use cows and sheep too. Again, a food source. That's all we need. After about 14 weeks, all of a sudden that fetus is gone because they've learned to take. That's when the fetus starts developing its own blood supply. Then they've used a pituitary hormone extract that they have, which accelerates the being that grows. Now, the reason was that our scientists were all excited because we could have spare parts. If you need a heart or a liver or anything, you won't have any rejection. It's your own DNA, right?
Okay, because theoretically, if we have overpopulation, we don't need more people, right?
But the so-called elite are selecting on who they want to have around anyway, so if we want to keep people going as long as we can. I talked to the doctor that was working on regeneration of Castro, for instance.
Right.
On the DNA sequencing. And they're just learning about this.
Well, my understanding is that a lot of presidents have already been replaced.
That's right. Look at the person and listen to him speak. Look at his actions. And listen to everything that's there. Now, it's a lot easier to put somebody out in front to act as even Bush did. He had somebody else that was up there acting like he is and look like it. Even Hitler had he had his stand. In fact, his stand-in was the one that they found in the ground over in Germany. I mean, Hitler and Eva and the dog and 14 other people got aboard a plane and flew down to Barcelona, Spain. You were aware of that. And then ended up in Antarctica, or in Swabenland, and then died a few years ago in Brazil.
That's what we heard. That's
I have all the documents from our own government.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a contact, one of our
Stalin
contacts.
Stalin asked for they tried to burn the body, and he got the body back, and he said, wait a minute, different ears, and the testicles were different and everything else, so they knew it wasn't Hitler.
But is it a clone or not?
Oh, now you know going about cloning. Cloning techniques, since 1938, they've been making clone people. There's 8 countries making clones. I have a doctor friend that all it does is treat the clones.
Where do you get your information?
I get it from some of the people that are willing to come forth, and they talk to me because they hope I'll put the information out, because they always got 2 people following them and they may be killed. If I start talking about cloning too much, the people that get involved into that you disappear on it. So I don't go into too many more details, but there is information that's available, and more and more of that's coming on the line. I just told you, go rent the movie.
Okay, Boys from Brazil.
Yeah, and you'll see the whole technique on what they show it to you in different places, so you can imagine what it's going on.
Okay, so
now let's go to the next step, because this is the most important part.
All right.
If your physical reality that you have, based on this physical life that you have, this dream, is made up of the experiences that is impregnated on your body and in your mind, consciously, right? Mm-hmm. Your soul memory is another thing. Show you the division on these things. Since the body's very physical, and we just got you making a physical being in a few months for spare parts, they said, now we've got the perfect deal. How can we have that work better? Well, if you go to the hospital today and get an encephalogram, what's that? That's the memory of your conscious mind. It's on the CD. Let's download it on this being. Now we got a walking, talking duplicate that has the total memory that you have, because we just took it off of your own mind.
Okay, it's like Blade Runner, the android.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. The only thing is that it's like this DVD recorder. Sometimes you have glitches in it. So you have to have them tuned up occasionally or redone them. And so we take them to Camp David, or there's a wing at Bethesda Hospital, to just tell you. If you go down there and check, you'll find the nurses, if they're willing to come forth, they'll tell you they work on those people, and they call them the others. I thought it was interesting. They're people. Remember, these people can think and act, but they don't have soul. That's also prophesized. Soulless beings.
That's true. That's true.
Now we have another agenda that's going on, so you have to be careful of all this. You have to be in on the game right now. So they can sometimes will come into these physical beings that we make to manipulate them.
I see.
So now you have a combination effort that you have to look at, and discernment. You have to discern what the game is. Well,
Will turn out fine if it's done properly with proper screening.
70% failure.
You simply don't allow it. You simply.
What do you do with them?
Huh?
What?
Obviously, they miscarry. They have to be terminated. I'm sorry. That is a necessary price. No, you terminate. You can have a terribly deformed child. Nature generally solves the problem by carrying a miscarriage.
How do you know they won't be born? Dolly's mutating. How do you know when the child?
She's a little fat because every journalist goes in there and gives her a piece of candy.
How do you know when that child
and that's why she's overweight.
No.
You would be overweight too. Look at all of us. Most of us are overweight. We're not gene mutating.
50 years ago?
I know very much. You know what happened? Politics got involved.
It's not about politics.
No, they took the muscle of the state.
It's a disgrace here.
They took the muscle of the state and put it behind who could breed and how they could breed, and that's just what you're trying to do.
Absolutely
telling people
not.
you have not the right to reproduce.
That science should not create monsters.
And you're saying we should outlaw science.
For now, the police in central Russia continue to collect evidence following a gruesome discovery earlier this week of almost 250 fetuses dumped in a forest. They are thought to have been used in scientific research by a woman who worked at a local medical university before being fired last year. But as RT's Sean Thomas found out, some experts think the fetuses could even be the product of cloning.
Right now, the investigation is focused on two parts. First, how did these 4 plastic containers containing 248 fetuses end up in the woods about 70 kilometers north of Yekaterinburg? Why and where did these fetuses come from? The possible explanation is legal scientific research. We do know that all of the fetuses that are in question here were terminated between 22 and 26 weeks. This is well past the 12-week mark, which is considered legal abortion in Russia, and after 22 weeks, women can only have an abortion only for medical necessary reasons. So is this an illegal abortion operation, or is this scientific research? No one really knows. They're trying to get to the bottom of that. We talked to one medical doctor. This is what they had to say about the subject.
This looks like some sort of thriller where organs were removed from fetuses to extract essences that theoretically can be used to rejuvenate people. There was a criminal case in Ukraine a while ago when women were deceived into terminating pregnancies quite late to extract tissue for rejuvenation purposes.
There is one woman who is in charge of some scientific research in the area. She was terminated in 2011. Police are looking to see if she had taken some of the material she was working with her when she left, and if this could possibly be that material. Now, there are some other disturbing theories saying that illegal scientific research could be behind this find as well. In fact, this is what one medical expert says on the subject.
It may sound a bit fantastical, but these fetuses could have been the product of cloning, despite its universal ban. And that's why they were thrown out like that, since these were not future human beings, but half human, half artificial creatures. It's a very daring theory. This might, of course, have been the product of miscarriages, but the fetuses could have been thrown out on purpose, to create scandal and attract attention. Maybe attract attention to the ban on cloning humans, or to abortions, to shock people with the sight of these fetuses.
We've been tracking this story from the very beginning and following the developments, and the feedback that we're getting is that it touches at the very core of what people believe, and so it's a controversial story. It has shocked many people around the world, and of course we'll be continuing to follow developments online at RT and here on screen as well as they become available.
In the eerie blue light of his secret lab, one of the world's most controversial scientists shows off his creation, cloned human embryos that are genetic carbon copies of their father.
Oh, my babies are doing well. They look beautiful.
Filmed for a TV documentary, Dr. Panagiotis Zavos implants 11 of the embryos in 4 women, one of them British, in the hope of producing the first cloned human being. The procedure is a criminal offence in the UK, but not in this undisclosed Middle Eastern country.
I think we have 3 very good embryos that could be in utero today, and that if implantation is successful as well, and the pregnancy is maintained, as we say in the US, we have a home run.
Dr. Zavos also reveals he's produced cloned embryos from 3 dead people. Inks have condemned his work as reckless. Cloning of animals, such as Dolly, has shown the technique carries risks of severe congenital abnormalities.
I find it A, incredible, and B, disgusting, because he's sowing false hope to begin with. So the individuals who are involved in this experiment, and that's what it is, an experiment, may well not realize that the outcome is almost certainly going to be negative. And to put couples through that, in my opinion, is unethical.
Which goes over the patient's head. It's very important, obviously, to cool the brain as quickly as possible. So apart from the circulating water, the cooling mask can also accelerate that procedure. So that's what we begin to do, and then transport the patient from here. If it's a local case, we'll move this into our emergency vehicle, lock it down, drive it here, and then move on to the operating room. If it's a case in another state, or in Canada, for instance, we'll put them on a plane, either a commercial or a chartered one, depending on the individual, fly them here right to the airport, which is right next door to Alcor. We have a number of surgeons on call, so we've already arranged for them to come over. The patient will then be lifted. We actually have a lift to do that, a proper pneumatic lift. They'll be moved here onto the operating table with the head at this end. And one of the first things we do is actually make a couple of burr holes in the skull, to, just like you do in brain surgery, essentially, to observe the brain, whether it's swelling or contracting. That tells us something about the circulation that we're getting. Then depending whether it's a whole body patient or someone just preserving the brain only, if it's a whole body patient, we'll access the major blood vessels of the heart and connect those up to the heat exchanger and the perfusion machinery here. And the idea there is to wash out the blood and body fluids as quickly and thoroughly as possible and replace those with a cryoprotectant, which will be in the reservoir here. And that starts off at a fairly low concentration because we don't want to chemically shock the cells, and we gradually ramp that up in concentration over time. So it's circulating and recirculating through the patient, gradually raising that concentration. The idea is to try and eliminate ice crystal formation. Ice crystals are the enemy of good biological sustainability. So actually what we will do in the end is vitrify the patient. The solution will get colder and colder, more and more viscous, and become really like a glass-like solid, holding everything in place. Now we're interested in the brain, but trying to remove the brain from the skull is just too difficult. Plus it provides additional mechanical protection, so there's no point trying to remove it. But it really is the brain we're interested in. We will then move the patient's cephalon, as we call it, to the cephalon box here, and the head actually goes upside down and is secured with these clamps. And then, as with the whole body patient, except this time we'll access the carotids, and we'll use the perfusion machinery here, and again the heat exchanger. The same thing, removing the fluids from the brain, the blood and body fluids as much as possible, gradually increasing the level of cryoprotectant, which will be monitoring with our computerized system here, basically telling us what temperature, what pressure, degree of concentration of the cryoprotectant. The cryoprotectant is really kind of a medical grade antifreeze, to put it sort of in simple terms. It protects the body against ice crystal formation, but it is itself somewhat toxic. There's no doubt our procedures do some additional chemical damage, so we try to minimize that by improving the formulation and by introducing it at the optimal speed, which we've learned through experience and experiment. Well, what we need to do now is move the patient, whether it's a neuro patient or a whole body patient, into the patient care bay, where we continue the cool down as rapidly as possible till we get down to minus 110 degrees C. At that point, we're going to slow down the process. But that's really the next step, is rapid cool down, either in the whole body cool down box or for the neuro patient in a smaller dewar. Essentially, we'll be injecting liquid nitrogen, pumping it in at a measured rate to control that rate of descent. We need to optimize the rate of descent to minimize any fracture. We can get about 10 neuro patients in the same volume, but we have slightly different pod systems, you can see. So the same size as a whole body pod, but here there's room for 10 neuro patients. And this is placed over the head. We currently have 117 patients, averaging about 8 per year, so it varies between about 3 and 11, depending on how busy the year is. These actually don't use any electricity. The alarm systems use electricity, but we don't need those to maintain the temperature. We just top up with liquid nitrogen, and as you can see, this is room temperature on the outside. It's like a gigantic thermos bottle. Yeah. We just fill these up every week or so. We can actually leave them for 6 months or so before they would reach a low level. But no electricity is required to maintain the temperature.